Thanks for coming, everybody. I'm Mark Ogge, Principal Advisor at the Australia Institute. We're here today launching our report showing that gas exports have led to a tripling of gas prices in Australia and a doubling of wholesale electricity prices. And we'll talk about that. I'll start by giving a brief introduction about our research. Then we'll go to Senator Pocock and Dr. Monique, who've been really strong advocates about better gas policies in Australia. And then we'll have Cassandra, Goldie, the CEO of ACOS, talking about the impact on ordinary households in Australia, and Geoff, CEO of Weld Australia, talking about the impact on manufacturing. So, as I said, the Australian Institute research that we're releasing today shows that gas exports have tripled wholesale gas prices in Australia and doubled electricity prices. When these companies were trying to get their projects approved, they told Australians that we would have abundant gas at low prices and endless economic benefits. None of that was true. What we've had instead is rolling gas shortages, skyrocketing gas and electricity prices, manufacturing closures, job losses, and a massive transfer of wealth from ordinary Australian households and businesses and manufacturing to multinational gas companies. We've had successive governments in Australia allowing the export of vast amounts of our gas to the global spot market instead of going to Australians. And they've allowed these companies to price gouge Australians for our own gas. The gas industry is ripping Australians off, and our governments are letting them. There's a simple solution to this that can be done tomorrow, and that is that the federal government stops the export of Australia's gas to the global spot market and requires it to be supplied to Australians instead. We don't need more gas reviews. We don't need thousands more pages of ACCC inquiries telling us what we've known for years and years. And we don't need more consultations with the gas industry because they run absolute rings around Australian governments and have captured our governments. What we need is for our government to stand up for the interests of Australians, not keep fawning to multinational foreign-owned gas corporations. I'll hand over to Senator Pocock.
Thanks, Mark, and I want to thank you and the Australian for your work on this. The major parties have sold the Australian people out. They've sold us out to big multinationals that are making an absolute fortune off our gas. This is a scam. What is happening is our natural resources are being sold off, given away, shipped off overseas, and we're not seeing the benefit of that. We're paying international prices for our own gas, and we're not even getting a return through things like the PRRT, which the latest forecast show is actually going to decline. This has to stop. We need a government with the courage to actually stand up to multinationals and say, we're going to put Australians first. You don't have to risk sovereign risk. You don't have to create sovereign risk. You don't have to renege on contracts. All you have to do is say uncontracted gas is staying in Australia. It is going to manufacturers, to businesses, and to households who are under a huge amount of pressure at the moment. This has to end. And until we actually have more people in this place who are going to make decisions for the Australian people and not for donors, not for multinational gas corporations, this scam is going to continue.
So many Australians in the last few months have opened their gas and electricity bills and just emitted a squeal of horror. We are paying far too much for electricity and gas in this country. We're repeatedly told by the government and by the gas industry that we need more gas facilities. It's not true. The east coast of Australia is swimming in gas. We use more gas preparing our gas for export than we do on the east coast of Australia. We are paying high prices for gas and for electricity because of decades of policy failure by governments and because of gouging by the gas industry. We need to take control of our own domestic gas production. We need to make sure that Australians can access that gas at affordable prices. It's only reasonable. But we need the government to have the courage to act against multinationals who are gouging us, to protect Australians.
Thanks. My name is Cassandra Goldie and I'm Chief Executive Officer of the Australian Council of Social Service. And I want to thank the Australia Institute and colleagues for this really important latest analysis about one of the big problems that we have with energy policy in Australia. Today, I'm here representing people out there who every single day are worried about whether or not they can afford to keep the lights on, whether or not they can afford to heat their home, whether or not they can afford to allow themselves to live with a level of basic dignity because of the size of their energy bill. This week, ACOS has been out with community sector organisations all over Australia saying we must have strong, fair action on climate change. Don't get me wrong here. We want to see an energy transition. But we also know that for us to be able to do that well and to look after people and communities, we must pull every single lever that is available to us. The reality is that we've got still many people who are relying on gas supply. The Albanese government in its first term invested, and we warmly welcomed it, about $800 million in starting to do energy performance upgrades to move to electrification for households. But we've still got many, many households that are heavily relying on gas supply, and they are paying far too much for their energy supply. And so we are urging the federal government and all sides of politics to come together again today to say, let us pull another big lever and let's make the most of the gas supply that we have available and make sure that that is a part of the solution to fixing people's energy bills and making sure that everybody can live with dignity and not be crushed by the size of that bill when it comes in. Thanks.
Thank you. Difficult to disagree with any of this so far. My name is Geoff Crittenden. I'm the Chief Executive of Weld Australia. I'm representing manufacturing today. And I hope in 2 years' time, I'll still be representing manufacturing, because unless we do something about the input costs to business, we simply will not have manufacturing in Australia. Now, you may think I'm scaremongering, but I spend a lot of time talking to industry, and everybody is complaining about the high cost of energy. I was out at Dux, the people that make water heaters, the other day, and their bills have trebled over the last 3 years. How can they be competitive with cheap, subsidised imports from overseas while we've got 3 times the energy input that we had 3 years ago? It's insane. We have to do something about that. We will not have a manufacturing industry. We are already 105th in the world behind Botswana. We need a manufacturing industry because every successful economy in the world has a strong manufacturing industry. We don't. We're going down. And I feel when I get up in the morning that I'm standing staring over the abyss, because that's where we are at the moment. We have to do something about energy prices, about cheap foreign imports. We have to regenerate our manufacturing industry if we want to have a strong economy and jobs for our kids. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, we're happy to take questions if anyone's got any.
Martha, you say you want to reserve spot market gas for the next 6 months. Is that enough to bring down gas prices, or do you want to see more? You want to break up the export?
We don't need to break up the export contracts. There's vast amounts of uncontracted gas, surplus gas, that's not under contract, that's currently being sent overseas to the global spot market ahead of it going to Australian customers. And that enables these companies to engineer gas shortages so they can use the arguments to get their new projects approved. And it also helps them to throttle the domestic market and drive up gas prices. These big foreign-owned companies exporting our gas are ripping us off, and our governments are letting them.
What about the structural problem in terms of getting the gas from Queensland to Victoria? There's just not enough capacity. What should we do?
Well, APR are already expanding the pipeline capacity to transport the gas. One of the big problems is that is that Victoria's gas reserves have diminished more quickly because the entire east coast is interconnected. So more gas is, so the Victorian fields which supply New South Wales and Victoria have depleted more quickly because of gas exports, which is hastening the demise, the depletion of our domestic gas reserves, and there's not a lot of gas left to find, and in terms of getting enough gas for those peak moments, it's an issue of storage and pipeline capacity, which are issues that can easily be solved, and but in the meantime we need to divert gas that that we're exporting to the global spot market ahead of Australians back to Australian customers.
Right, again, comes from the Guardian. Just a question around, does this involve no new gas fields then? Or is this an argument that we have enough existing gas and we don't need to say more gas or exploiting more gas? Exploiting more gas, maybe a question that
Yeah, do you want to answer that, David?
Well, I mean, yeah, go for it. I'll jump in.
Yeah, we export 80% of our gas. We do not need new gas fields. We are one of the biggest gas producers in the world, the third largest exporter in the world. We have got vast amounts of gas, and the problem isn't that we don't have enough gas. The problem is we're sending our gas overseas, often to countries who then re-export it at a profit. None of these gas exporters have ever paid we're getting very little out of it. None of these gas exporters have ever paid petroleum resource rent tax. They get most of the gas that they export for free. None of the big gas export projects operating in Queensland, up to the latest ATO tax transparency data, have ever paid corporate tax. We are absolutely getting ripped off. We need to keep the gas in the ground so it can supply Australians over the decades to come, to the extent that we need it, because gas demand in Australia is in decline.
I think it's so clear we've got enough gas for the transition, and we're being totally hoodwinked by these companies. You take Inpex, for example, exporting our gas, not paying petroleum resource rent tax, somehow not paying much corporate tax at the same time. And then we've got the Japanese government, who last year made over $1 billion re-exporting our gas, saying, Australia, you need to bring on more gas. And we've got to, the two major parties just happy to bend over backwards and just say, yeah, sure, whatever you want. And I think the ICJ ruling that came out recently is a big warning for Australia. We go down this path of expanding the fossil fuel industry at a time where we know the consequences of that. We're going to have Pacific Island nations taking us to court and saying, well, time to pay up.
Gas reservation policy on this coast is not sufficient.
Well, we don't even need one, is my understanding. Uncontracted gas is way more than our projected shortfall. So they'll dance around, and everything will lead to we need more gas, because that's what the industry wants, because they're making a lot of money and not paying us for our gas. That's not the reality of the situation.
Cassandra, Pocock, what's your sense of the popularity of a gas reserve, of reserving, export gas for domestic use? So, ordinary Australians seem quite happy with that idea. What's your feeling?
No, I think Aussie punters are starting to realise that we've been scammed. We are being totally scammed out of revenue from our natural resources. These are finite resources. Once they're gone, they are gone. And the major parties are happy just to give them away for, I don't know, some sweet plum jobs after politics and some political donations. This is total madness. This is this is insanity.
Can I speak
And
to that?
I think more and more Australians are starting to go, well, okay, let's look for alternatives to the major parties.
Yeah. I've been really conscious in the last 4 years of the slow dawning realisation from Australians of how significantly we have been duped by our governments, by decades of policy failure, particularly on gas. And I found in the recent election campaign that every time I said the word gas to a middle-aged man, steam started coming out of his ears, because people have realised that we are not getting anywhere near just rewards for our huge gas exports. that we're being done over by multinationals, but also that our governments have failed us again and again and again. Every time one of us opens our bills for electricity or for gas, we are seeing evidence of government failure. And Australians are realising that. They don't care how we get gas into their homes. They just want to know that there will be a reliable and affordable supply of gas until we make an effective transition. They want us to do that. They want us to transition. They know that in the next 10, 15, 20 years, worldwide gas demand will fall. And so new developments like the pipelines from Queensland could well end up being stranded assets. Australians don't really care about the mechanics. They just want to have access to affordable gas until we can make a just transition to a net zero economy.
Can I just want to make a really clear point here about the winners and losers out of this. We represent the ordinary people out there on low incomes, on modest incomes, who are struggling to cover the cost of their housing, to pay their energy bills, and to be able to live with a level of dignity. Now, there are people out there who have significant wealth, have already used all the best of technology, they've transitioned to renewables, they're actually generating energy, and they've dramatically reduced their energy bills. But we have all over the country people who are not in a position to do that themselves. Now, I talked about the important commitment from the Albanese government in the first term to invest in energy performance upgrades. But that at the moment will only get us about 25% upgrades to social low-income housing. We've got thousands and thousands and thousands of people out there who cannot do this without further support and are heavily reliant on gas supply. So I really urge all political parties to get behind doing whatever we can to both tackle climate action, climate change, to make sure that we are not generating more carbon emissions into the atmosphere, but we are making the best we can of the gas supply that we've got to bring down those prices for people who are going to be relying on gas because they cannot afford yet to transition to the renewables that we need. This is a part of the transition plan and it must not be missing in action, and we've waited far too long for it. Thanks.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to keep up to date with all our latest research and work, sign up to our newsletter. Delivered every fortnight, it includes behind-the-scenes updates from Richard Dennis, an exclusive cartoon from Judy Horacek, details for our upcoming events and webinars, as well as explainers, graphs, and not to mention the latest cutting-edge research and analysis from the team here on the key issues that are facing Australia. Click the button on your screen to check it out.